Hey, I'm David Liggett with Data Center Hawk. I'm here with Edward Henigin, the Chief Technology Officer with Data Foundry. And this is Hawk Talk 42. We're talking about the data center industry next. Hey, I'm David Liggett with Data Center Hawk. Focused on cloud and colocation, data center industry trends, the dynamic market. Edward Henigin, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We are excited for you to join us and talk about the data center industry. So
great. I live for it.
Well, you've been in it for a long time, and we were talking off camera about how you were part of the group that founded and started Data Foundry.
That's right.
You Chief Technology Officer there. Been in the space for a long time. I talk about this all the time. This is one of my favorite things I get to do is talk to people, number one, leaders in the industry, but also those that have seen some pretty dramatic changes in the space, in the market. But before we get into some of those changes, let's talk about how you got started in the data center industry and how you got started at Data Foundry.
It's like falling downstairs. You just start, and then it kind of goes on its own after a little bit.
It happens.
When I was in college in the early 90s, I was introduced to this thing called the internet, and it really blew my mind. I grew up in Hawaii, and I went to college in Peoria, Illinois, and the college I went to in Peoria had this program called the Dorm of the Future, where they put an internet-connected computer in every single dorm room. So,
and this was what, early 90s?
Yeah, 90.
Okay.
I was there 90 to 94.
Okay, sure.
And so I show up at college, and this is a bit of a culture shock for me, growing up in Hawaii and moving to the heartland of Peoria. And, we get there and meeting people and getting used to this place. And we get on the internet, and I realize that I can actually connect to and communicate with people back in Hawaii over this computer thing, like live, real-time kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind. And by the time I graduated, I knew I wanted to be involved in the internet somehow. And I had met a friend online, and he and his family were starting an internet provider. So I hooked up with them, and I became basically their first employee to come down to Texas to do that. And I've already forgotten exactly what your question was because I'm just telling my story.
No,
you said, how did we get in the data center business? So we started on the internet side. So it all starts with that connecting people. And when the internet started for us, so we started Texas.net in 94.
Okay.
And we were focused on consumer ISP. So we had the modem banks. We went to the Alamo PC users group down in San Antonio. There's a big bulletin board users group down there. And I got up in front of them, and we told them all about, hey, your bulletin board is awesome. It's amazing the chat rooms you have on there, and it's amazing the file share that you have on there. But let me tell you what you can find on the internet, which connects the entire world, not just a city. And we got a lot of signups.
Yeah.
And one thing led to another, and we snowballed, and we were serving quite a few individual consumer dial-up ISP customers, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, Dallas, over the next few years. But then we had the telecom deregulation, which would have given us access to DSL and cable lines into the houses, into residences. So, we started with our internet service serving customers over POTS lines, and everybody had equal access to POTS lines, right? So I have a directory of internet providers from 1997. Boardwatch magazine, I don't remember how far back. Anyway, Boardwatch magazine had a directory they put out quarterly, and in 1997, there were 55 internet providers you could choose from in the 512 area code in Austin. Okay, that was because the POTS line was an open network that anybody could sell or buy internet service across. So when the DSL lines started coming out and the cable lines started coming out, and those were locked down to the carriers, and then we had telecom deregulation that was going to blow them open for us, we thought, okay, we've got a future here. We're going to transition from POTS to DSL and cable. And then, the fix was in. I'm not going to get all conspiracy theory here, but the government decided to come back in and say, nah, we're not going to enforce any of that stuff. So we saw that all of us independent ISPs were going to be locked out of consumer internet. So, we had to pivot.
Adjust.
So we got this high bandwidth, which is not just good for people, it's also good for servers. Right? A server without a network connection is a doorstop.
Sure,
Or
nothing,
it's a space heater.
Yeah.
What's the point? So we, in the late 90s, we built our first data center in a bank vault in downtown Austin, in the basement bank vault. We attracted a few customers. Times were tough in the 2000,
Yeah,
2001,
sure.
2002
Yep.
timeframe. Actually, the times were great for a little while.
Sure. And then they changed quickly.
And then all of a sudden they weren't.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we opened our first data center in 2000 timeframe.
Yeah.
And that was when Exodus was going up and to the right.
Uh-huh.
They were going crazy. Exodus was building a data center out in Austin, and we walked on the site and we just walked around the construction. We were pretty impressed.
Yeah.
They're putting a lot of money into
Sure.
it, money we didn't have.
Yeah.
We couldn't compete with that. But sometimes having too much money isn't such a good thing. So
Yeah.
Exodus goes belly up.
Yep.
And in 2002, we bought the internet provider and data center provider arm of Reliant Energy.
Sure.
So that was the time frame when all of these different companies thought they could get into the data business, the internet business,
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah.
But then they decided they wouldn't. So we got, for pennies on the dollar, a colocation facility in Houston.
Uh-huh.
And then in 2003, we closed on another colocation facility in Austin from NTT Vario,
Okay.
who also was
Yeah.
exiting the colocation
Yeah.
business at that time. And that was the beginning of it all. That was we internet to our own data center,
Yeah.
to picking up at fire sale prices from everybody else,
Sure.
and just
Kinda birthed the business
grew
and-
from
yeah.
there. Figured it out as we went along.
Yeah, so I know there's a number of people watching and listening that know about the Data Foundry portfolio, but talk about where it is today. I mean, obviously, as you mentioned, and I think it kind of speaks to the maturity of the market where, if you look at like what was going on 2000 to 2005, it was, buying, acquiring assets, many
Yeah.
times pennies on the dollar.
And it was very speculative.
Sure.
At that point.
Yes. And then, and so then obviously now we've seen a significant change in how these facilities are being delivered and the professionalism behind
Oh my gosh.
building. So talk about just the portfolio today and some of the changes there.
Oh, it's such a different world today. But we lived and sold out of the acquired facilities that we had, and for a number of years. And in 2009, we launched our greenfield project in Austin. So we bought a 40-acre property in Austin.
Yep.
And went out and found and contracted with the best designers that we could find.
Yeah.
The best construction folks we could find. And we went in with this giant wish list. So from the 2003 to 2009 timeframe, we were growing the data center business kind of slow and steady, not super aggressively, just kind of letting it be really healthy and stable and with a steady growth, but without a huge investment. During that time frame, we were real focused on one of the other businesses that spun out of Texas.net, and that was the GigaNews Usenet News Group's business. And with GigaNews, we deployed servers all across the world. We deployed them in Europe and Asia and in multiple places in North America. And while we were doing that, we got to go tour all these other data centers in the world. So we got to see how Equinix
Yeah.
ran things, how folks in Hong Kong ran things,
Interesting.
how folks in Europe. So we, the Telecities and the Interactions and all these folks, we got to see how they built their facilities and how they ran their businesses.
Yeah.
So in 2009, when it came time for us we were really shifting our focus and going to double down on the data center business. We got the best designers,
Yeah.
the best engineers we could find, and we went in with these wish lists. We're like, oh, and we saw this feature and it was awesome, and this one was
Yeah.
really cool too. And they're like, okay, we'll design whatever you want.
Yeah.
And we built the Texas One data center out of that, which opened in 2011.
Yeah.
And then we learned a lot of lessons from that. Did a greenfield construction in Houston, our Houston 2 facility, and then we came back to Austin for an expansion. So on the same property as the Texas 1, we built Texas 2. So we're just slowly filling out
Yeah.
that 40-acre property with
Yeah.
a lot of runway there. And that's where we sit today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. I always love hearing just the stories of how companies have evolved over time, and it really speaks to the maturity of the market. It really speaks to, I think, data center operators understanding, like, hey, we're going to listen to our customers, what they want, understand what's most efficient. really understand densities and try to meet users where they are and where we want them to be down the road.
Yeah.
So there's, it's always an interesting story. You mentioned Austin and Houston. And so I think one of the interesting things about Data Foundry, and I've walked through the facilities before, is it's got a focus, kind of a regional focus.
Mm-hmm.
But talk about why you all have chosen to, focus on this area versus going and expanding into, markets in Chicago and this or that. You all have doubled down right here in, big markets in Texas. Why has that been your focus?
Yeah, a lot of it is that's just who we are and what we want to do. It's
Sure.
really our identity. I don't know that it's so much a grand master plan business decision of like, hey, this is how we're going to conquer the world by conquering these two markets.
Yeah.
It's just where we want to be. We believe in the markets. We believe that we can execute in those markets. It's relatively low risk for us, very manageable.
Yep.
And we believe in Austin and Houston in particular. Houston being sort of the I don't know the right word is like a flyover market in the sense that it's a big economy. Nobody goes to Houston to deploy their data computing.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll go to Dallas. Maybe they go to Virginia, but they don't go to Houston. It's all serving local businesses.
Yes.
Pretty similar in Austin. There's some that comes from out of town, but it's mostly local that we're servicing in Austin. And we just made it our identity that we want to own these markets. We want to do really well here. We want to put ourselves in a position where we can execute without fail with perfection, and that's these markets that we're in.
Yeah, so let's talk about Houston for a minute. And your comment there is interesting, and I think it's spot on as it relates to the amount of businesses in Houston.
Oh yeah,
I mean it's just
it's like I don't know what the stat is, but
Sure.
it's like if it was a country, it'd be like the 12th largest.
Yeah,
in the world or
so
whatever,
it just
something like that.
Massive market, and but talk about there's a couple things I'd like you to hit on. One is just industries that are there that are continuing to grow and change, and I know that obviously creates opportunities for companies like yours and others, and then also talk about how some of the challenges with Houston have like repositioned the market over the last several years. And because I always look at that market as one that those companies have really gotten comfortable with going, hey, we want our deployments closer to us than, rather than far away. And there's certain risk elements that everybody evaluates and goes, hey, we're comfortable with this. We know we can get through X, Y, and Z, and so we're comfortable being here. But talk about Houston as a market, what industries you see growing there, and how it's changed over time.
Yeah, I mean, Houston, of course, you've got the geography. I mean, you can't get around it that, it's low, it's flat, it's on the coast.
Sure.
You got hurricane risk, you got flood risk.
Yeah.
And then, being coastal, you got the heavy industry, the ports, the energy, all of that are really kind of the core backbone of the Houston economy. But healthcare is really huge there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that going on there. It really is kind of Houston is more of a destination for healthcare more so than a lot of other markets.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the energy businesses are real international businesses. They're really dynamic. They've got massive ups and down swings, as
part of
anybody reading the headlines today.
Sure. Price of oil or barrel
honestly,
oil.
I came in and I was a little surprised that we all shook hands because I've been doing the Corona shake, the elbow shake with a lot of people lately. But yeah, Houston's got all that international exposure and very dynamic, very responsive. I mean, we saw Marathon Oil Company, for example, made their announcement that they were cutting their capital budget for 2020 by like 25%, like overnight. Like, okay, stock dropped.
Yeah.
We're correcting course.
Yep.
So it's very, very a market where you got to be real adaptable.
Yep.
To be surviving over the long term. And that's cool. That's fine with us.
Sure.
We're good with that.
Yeah. I think it takes people that have been there or companies that have been there for a while to understand the dynamics and be able to go, this is part of it.
That's
and
exactly right.
We understand that when it's like this, we've got to adjust. But on the flip side, we certainly have seen times where activity in that Houston market is, very quickly advancing and growing
Yeah.
because of large requirements, whether it's
Yep.
oil and gas, healthcare, whatever. I was going to say a healthcare thing. I think I often forget how that healthcare is such an important
it's
part of the
huge.
Houston,
Oh, yeah.
economy, just because my mind goes to energy,
Yeah.
but it is a big part of that
And
market.
industry, I mean, when you say energy, that means so many things.
Sure.
There's so many facets
Yeah.
on the energy, the services, the
Yeah.
development, the geophysical. I mean, there's just so many aspects of that they're all kind of leading and lagging in terms of the economy and, the disciplines and their requirements and how they
Yes.
approach things. So, it's not just one
Sure.
thing.
Yeah. Now, when I think of Austin, I went to Baylor, so then I traditionally think of the Longhorns. And when I went to school, the Longhorns just decimated the Baylor Bears. It's changed a bit since then, not all the time, but I also think about obviously the Austin data center market, and talk about why and how you all have seen users grow in that market over the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. It's I want to share numbers, but I'm not going to. But when we were running out of our the original Austin data center that we had acquired from Vario, it's out by the airport. We had real slow, real steady growth, and I think that if a traditional rational investor were to take what our growth was from 2003 to 2009 and extrapolate off of that, there's no way they would have put $50 million into the ground to build a big data center. Because it didn't appear as if the
Sure.
demand was actually there.
Yep.
Austin has been perceived as a very attractive place, a very quickly growing place. I guess if you look economically and population-wise, the exponential growth in Austin has been going on for decades. And it's just what's happening now is just a continuation of that. But in terms of the business of data processing and all that we do, it really wasn't that much happening on that front back in the mid-2000s. But we believed in it. We built a big property, and when we did, big opportunities materialized. So apparently they were out there. They just didn't have any place to go.
Yeah.
So, as we've built and grown, and as we've developed our reputation, pushed our reputation out there, and word getting around in other companies, and all of the growth that's happening everywhere, we are seeing more and more large deals coming to us. They think that the classic statistic is, I think you were even talking about it, something like 65% of all data processing is still happening in corporate data centers, right? It's not. It's like there's still a lot of that's untapped, and it's going to come out. And I think we're going to see a cycle. We're already seeing it happening to some extent, but I think it's going to accelerate, where those internal data centers are aging, and they're running on UPSs that are getting end-of-lifed. The parts you can't get anymore, and they're going to be facing those decisions about, do we put more money in our facilities group, or we just get the heck out of that program and let somebody else do it. And in Central Texas, there's going to be a wave of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think if I think about the 07, 08, 09 time period, especially when the capital markets kind of blew up, and if you're a data center operator and you're presenting a data center facility that is efficient, feels good, companies could bring their C-level executives in and say, this is going to be the new home for, that was the perfect scenario for growth to begin. I think a lot of times in markets that are maybe smaller than the Chicagos and Dallases and Northern Virginias of the world, if there's nothing built, there just aren't good options. But when the options come, you got very smart people that have done this for a long time. The concept makes sense, and it's one of the reasons that it's happening in other markets as well. So I'd love to get your thoughts on, and this isn't one of the questions we talked about, but as we're sitting down, you have seen hundreds, maybe even thousands of data center users deploy, their IT infrastructure within your footprint. How have you seen companies do it well versus companies that stumble their way through the process? And so maybe it's what are some of the characteristics of companies that, are able to, maybe it's sizing the requirement right, or it's understanding your infrastructure, understanding what are some things you think companies can do today to make sure they get the process right?
I mean, honestly, going through the shopping process, I think, is kind of the easier part.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you look at an entire project from beginning, from formulation to complete closeout on a data center migration or standing up even, you know, the selection of the colocation provider is just, you know, 10%, 20% of the whole thing. And the budget, it's a fraction of the overall budget. You know, all of the IT gear that our customers buy far outvalues the entire data center, right? So I mean, we're building in our data center. I estimate that our customers' IT gear is somewhere 3 to 5 times the value of the facility. You know, and that IT gear turns over every three to 5 years.
Yeah.
So the amount of investment by our customers is dramatically higher than our investment. So, you know, for when I see customers doing it successfully, part of it is having the right perspective. So standing back and looking at the big picture of everything that has to happen from beginning to end to be successful. And the other part of it, frankly, I hate to say it to all the CFOs out there listening, you can't skimp on the budget for staffing the planning side of it, the planning and project management side, because we repeatedly seen clients come in, and as they're deploying, they realize, oh shoot, we forgot this, oh shoot, we forgot that. And you know, we've been there, we've done that. This isn't our first rodeo. We respond pretty quickly and pretty well in those situations. We help customers out. Oh, your whips are wrong, your cross connects are wrong, your power requirement's wrong, no problem, we'll take care of you. You know, we've seen it all before. But for them in that moment, that's a panic because they haven't, it's their first time seeing it. But you know, the ones that have done it well have the staff in place who are able to think through all of those corner cases or whatever, all the things that other people aren't thinking of. And have the plans to be able to take care of them. So
no, it's always good to hear from people that have watched the process, you know, and seen it done well, and then probably had some other experiences where they would suggest those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's I guess it's every size company, every style company is going to have their own tolerance for, shall we say, being dynamic in the moment. But yeah, the ones that go well, it's because they didn't skimp on the staff up front to ensure it's going to be good. Yeah,
that's good. Let's stay on data center users for a moment. What are consistent trends that you're seeing, you know, whether it's a financial company or a technology company or healthcare company, trends that are impacting their data center infrastructure decision-making process? I mean, what are the things that they're wrestling with?
The big one obviously is cloud, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. We you know, years ago there was the sense that cloud's going to kill data centers.
Oh, sure.
So, you know, we're watching it. We're not really seeing a decline in demand. So, you know, the appetite for computing and for data storage is just insatiable. You know, you see the stats where whatever it is, 80% of all data generated that exists today was generated in the last 12 months. So what's the next 12 months going to look like? You know, it's unbelievably explosive in terms of data generation, data processing. And so that means that everything's growing. Cloud's growing, colocation's growing, on-premise is probably growing somewhere. I don't know. You know, they keep talking about edge, whatever the heck that means. You know, that's going to be growing. I guess, you know, my phone's got more memory in it now than it did 3 years ago. So that's part of the data storage and data processing. But, you know, we did see some folks optimistically move to cloud, start seeing the bills, and then they start pulling back from the cloud. So the cloud integration is probably where there's a lot of thought going in terms of the bandwidth and in terms of the application architectures and the IT architectures to be able to be fluid so that you really have your costs contained and your compliance and your risk management and everything, like, you know, the family jewels just all, you know, there in the data center on total control, but then having that flexibility to burst to the cloud or take some of that load, the more generic load, peel it off to the cloud. So that's probably the biggest change that we've seen.
Why do you think connectivity it seems like it's becoming much more important in the discussion, network increasing in importance? Why is that?
We probably have a little bit of a unique perspective on that because we started as an ISP.
Exactly, yeah.
So for us, network was always the obvious, most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happened was the data center business was, digital really being an early success.
Yep.
Equinix being, frankly, an early success. A lot of those guys really coming from more of a real estate background, and they see the big dollars going in the shell and the electrical and mechanical infrastructure, and they think, well, this is what's probably the most important thing about the data center, where we're spending all the money and where we have to have all the expertise.
Yep.
And then the customers come in, and again, if they can't connect their servers to something, it's a space heater.
Yep.
So we came from the network side, and when we were focusing on the Giganu side of our business, and we were going around all over the world, the places we always wanted to go were the places that had the most network. So we could 2 or 3 data centers in the city. One of them could be amazing, awesome, off the charts, cool, but it had no connectivity. And so the few carriers who were there would charge you an arm and a leg for the most minimal amount of bandwidth, and the bandwidth might be kind of mediocre. So we knew that when we were going to do our facilities, we focused right up front on bandwidth. It's a snowball effect. The facilities that have the most bandwidth are the places where the customers want to most be. And once the most customers are there, that's when all of the other carriers want to be there too, because they want access to that market. And then the carriers who go in there and make their investment, they can leverage that investment. They can get more economies of scale out of their carrier investments. So it's easier to convince new carriers to come in, and it's easier to convince existing carriers to upgrade because all the business that's there. It's like that watering hole in the desert. Everybody comes to it.
Yeah.
So for us, we've always seen network as being critically important. And I think the only reason that people are today maybe waking up to that importance is just because they were just missing it before.
Sure.
They just weren't thinking about it.
That makes sense. So I'm going to probably ask you a question that'll make you laugh a little bit, but what's a typical day for you as Chief Technology Officer look like? I mean, what is, I love listening and getting to talk to leaders about, hey, and what's your typical day look like? What does it consist of? Are you talking to end users? Are you doing strategic, planning? Where do you spend your time?
So as the CTO, my focus is around more the long-term vision of what is a data center, what does it look like, what should it look like, where does it need to go. We've got real, frankly, with the industry maturing, there was a lot of cost pressure. There was a lot of a lot of value engineering.
Yeah.
How do you make these facilities cheaper while still achieving the mission? And so thinking through electrical, mechanical, and a lot of even the delivery of that.
Yep.
How does the construction work? So I have much less of a focus on the construction side of it. We've got some other fantastic folks who do that. But I work with them. So we do a lot of stuff hand in hand about, okay, what if we approach it this way? What if we approach it that way?
Yeah.
How can we deliver faster? How can we bring our costs down?
Yeah.
While still having that, the presentation to the customers and the features that the customers want and need that really attract them to the site. Yeah,
that's good. Well, that's my next question was just around data center design, and we don't have to get into the one lines, but from your standpoint, what's been the biggest change on the electrical and mechanical side? And it might be that just you were talking about the value engineering side and just trying to work out like, hey, what did users really want 5 years ago? What do they really feel comfortable with today? And some of the changes. But what have you seen as the biggest changes that have taken place in the electrical and mechanical world?
It would be really cool. I would love to sit here and say something revolutionary. I mean, we've had all these different technologies that have come out that have been really interesting, like the Kyoto cooling, that whole free cooling kind of stuff, and flywheel or the integrated flywheel generator, UPSs, the pillar and and folks like that, the high tech. We've seen some really neat things coming through, but what happens is it's really tough to bet against commodity This is like the whole, like the big analogy for me is chips. You know, Intel with the x86 chip, that was a cheap, high volume processor that could work pretty well in every application. And all these other folks, Digital and Cray, I don't know, they had these really fancy chipsets that were just better, but they couldn't ever get the volume out of them in order to bring the costs down, in order to ultimately the swarm of massive volumes of Intel chips just won the day. And so we look at things like we, in our Texas 1 facility, we went in with a water-cooled chiller system because that was going to be the most efficient and effective cooling system. And as we matured and moved on to our later data centers, we did real careful ROI analysis on it. And what's happened is the air-cooled chillers have gotten more efficient over time, and those are commodity units. Those things are those chillers you can put in on office buildings. You can put them all over the place, and because of the volume and all of the snowball effect of that, where they can put more money into engineering those things and optimizing them, and then their production line gets more efficient. Man, those things are like, they're surprisingly good. You know, their efficiencies are gotten really good, and their costs have come down. So the water-cooled chillers just can't compete anymore. So that's happening along the line. So the generators, the UPSs, the chillers, the switchgear, everything that you saw cool 10 years ago that was like gonna blow the industry open because of some innovation they had, they could never achieve the volume to get their costs down and their quality up. You know, in a relative sense compared to everything else. So, you know, so I wanted to tell you that story, but I can't. So a story I can tell you is really around size, building in bigger chunks with bigger units and bigger volumes all at once is really how you get the most efficiencies. And that's really the evolution. So in the data center market, you know, you don't see people building 1-2 megawatt data centers anymore. It's building 10, 20 megawatt data centers now. Now, a lot will be phased, but still the building blocks are all a lot bigger. And it's designed, and so you're leveraging your investment all over the place to make everything more efficient.
I think it's like the vision, I would think, from a data center operator has gotten bigger because the user demand in some ways has gotten, you know, if it's 50 companies across the world, but they have some demand sizes that are larger than some sizes we've ever seen in the market, but also the efficiencies that process allows you to achieve, you know, better serves the user and, you know, keeps customers.
We think of, when we think of space and power planning, we think of the least unbroken space. So, you know, you always want to have, but we're always playing Tetris. So I mean, you have a 2 megawatt customer come in, you know, you need to have a room that's at least 2 megawatts. But really you want a 3 or 4 megawatt room so that you can fit them in wherever you are in your life cycle on selling out that room. So bigger is the way to go.
Okay, so let's talk. I mean, neither of us have a crystal ball, but what do you think will impact the data center industry significantly over the next?
What's going to impact the data center industry over the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, you know, in the short term, obviously, we've got a big stock market correction happening right now with the COVID. Right? I mean,
like literally right now. Yes, like as we're talking.
Somebody watching this a few years from now, we were there.
Or you could put like the Dow Jones Industrial when we started and when we finished, and we'll see what. Be painful.
Hopefully, I was doing something in the stock market. Anyway, protect myself. You know, the trend. The macro trend in our economy is automation, right? And computing, data processing is all about information automation. And all of the things that enables that simply wouldn't be possible or feasible otherwise. So it's still a lot of creativity out there about what are the different things we can do with lots of computing power. AI is obviously a big one, and you know, watching AI roll out from being like Google or Siri or Apple Siri or something that from this like on high kind of thing that only the biggest of the big can have, rolling out to solutions that everybody can take advantage of, everybody can integrate more directly in their business. You know, that kind of computing is going to be interesting. So even trying to tie these threads together, even with the gyrations that can happen in the economy,
Yeah.
automation isn't going anywhere.
Sure.
And if anything, there's going to be phases where these cycles of economy are going to drive phases of investment into automation. Companies trying to do more with less, and thinking about how do I get more productivity? How do I get more things happening automatically? Things happening on their own, self-service, and that kind of stuff. So broadly, in terms of computing, up and to the right, man, I don't know what. I would love to see some futurist who's thinking about what are the fundamental limits of data processing that we're going to hit in the future in terms of when does the value actually start decreasing? Like, I don't know, man. It's crazy. There's always something new that can be done that provides value to society. In terms of like where that data processing is happening, man, that's honestly a tough one too, because so much is happening in the cloud, but there's just limits. There's just limits to what people are going to be willing to tolerate and operate in that way. So I do think that the smaller end of the market, the lower end of the market, is going to be tough for them to justify running any IT in-house. It's really that medium-sized to large. And when I say large, that's a level below gigantic.
Sure.
So there's going to be a lot of in-house computing. It's going to be, and honestly, I don't see it changing from being regional. I just don't. The trend that I've seen in the past is that geography matters, and people like things to happen in a certain place. I mean, in theory, if there's a place in China that's got 2 cents a kilowatt hour power that has no bearing, nobody in Houston's going to go take up their giant server farm and move it to that province in China, because the geography still matters. There's just no way around it.
We're smirking at each other because we literally we have a blog series right now called Data Center Fundamentals. So for people that are entering into the industry, just to learn some of the basic topics, and the one thing literally we're writing today is that data center location matters. Like, you can build data centers anywhere, that whole theory, but the reality is, like, it costs money. That's great, but if there's no fiber, there's no connectivity close by, it's going to cost a lot of money.
So back to the telecom, right?
Take a lot of time. And so it does matter strategically where, your IT infrastructure is located based on business needs or whatever it might be. So, I want to thank you for joining us and being here. This has been, a great conversation. It's datafoundry.com.
Datafoundry.com. That's our website.
And again, these are state-of-the-art facilities in Austin and Houston. And this is a company that's been around a long time, and will be around a long time in the future. So if you're listening and you're looking to connect with them, again, it's datafoundry.com. And
we are proud of our facilities. We love them. We love to show them off.
Come on.
You don't have to be a customer. Just come on out. Give us a call. We'll give you a tour. We love these things.
That's awesome. Well, Edward, thanks so much for joining us. It'll be fun to watch Data Foundry grow in the future.
Thank you, David.